What's good? It's Wood. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Ryan Garcia, 22 wins and 0 losses, taking on Javier Fortuna, 37 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, and 2 no contests. This is the latest step-up fight for, hot prospect contender, one of the most exciting and talked about young names in the game, Ryan Garcia, who famously went viral showcasing a lot of his training clips, flashing his hand speed and so forth, to where he's become one of the rare exceptions where the name and the fame have pretty much outpaced, at least early, have outpaced the in-ring accomplishments. Think Edgar Berlanga, the type of notoriety that he got with his 16 consecutive first-round knockouts. By the time Ryan Garcia was 19 years old, 20 years old, he was already much bigger of a name than a lot of boxers who actually held titles. Well, that reputation changed big time when in 2001, January of 2001, Ryan Garcia stepped up and beat former title contender Luke Campbell via 7th round TKO. That changed the conversation around Ryan Garcia from, hey, this guy looks like he has a lot of potential, to, whoa, he appears to be the truth. Because not only did he get off the deck when he got dropped in, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd round, but he ended up, again, scoring a knockout to the body of Luke Campbell in the 7th round. So now he's about to fight Javier Fortuna, who he was scheduled to fight Fortuna early last year, 2021. That was supposed to be his fight following the Luke Campbell fight, especially because Ryan Garcia was unwilling to fight Devin Haney when Ryan Garcia was in fact the mandatory challenger and WBC interim lightweight champ when Devin Haney held the actual title. So Ryan Garcia opted not to challenge Devin Haney for Devin Haney's then one belt. Haney has since won the others off of George Kambosos out in Australia. But Ryan Garcia then went hunting for a Manny Pacquiao fight, for a Gervonta Davis fight. He basically sidestepped Devin Haney, didn't really think it was worth it at the time. So then he eventually, when the Manny Pacquiao thing didn't work out and no fight was made between him and Gervonta Davis, Javier Fortuna was supposed to be Ryan Garcia's next opponent. And that's when Ryan Garcia pulled out of the fight due to mental health reasons. And then later on in the year, he was supposed to fight JoJo Diaz after JoJo actually beat Javier Fortuna in July of 2021. Ryan Garcia was then supposed to fight JoJo, then he pulled out of that one because of a hand injury, so then that fight was also postponed. So yeah, he basically in 2021 sidestepped Devin Haney, pulled out of a scheduled fight with Javier Fortuna, and then withdrew from a fight with JoJo Diaz. And then he returned to the ring in April of 2022 to fight Emmanuel Tagoe out of Ghana. But here he's about to fight, Javier Fortuna, who is a former WBA regular super featherweight title holder. So at 130, he had held a share of the title for a couple of fights, and then he had lost it to Jason Sosa via 11th round TKO. That was a big setback for Fortuna. But all in all, this matchup presents a very unique challenge for Ryan Garcia. Not only is Javier Fortuna a super experienced southpaw, but also is a rugged fighter and has fought some very good fighters who you could argue at this point might even be better than Ryan Garcia, such as Robert Easter Jr., who Javier Fortuna fought to a split decision loss. Very close fight back in January of 2018. So Ryan Garcia, if you look at how he was kind of working up the ranks, he started to earn some impressive victories, for instance, over Jason Velez. But then there was a fight that I want to return to in assessing this Garcia versus Fortuna matchup, and that was against Carlos Morales in September of 2018. This was a fight where in the beginning of the fight, the whole crowd was chanting Ryan. It sounded like a pep rally. Again, Ryan Garcia's name was super buzzing and viral at the time. He was kind of like this major golden boy prospect, and so he's fighting Carlos Morales, and this fight ended up being much more difficult than people anticipated, to where in the middle rounds, Ryan Garcia started to get rocked, and he stopped pursuing Carlos Morales so heavily. He was starting to respect Morales' counterpunching ability. Ryan Garcia's hand speed started looking a lot slower in the middle rounds, where it didn't look like that blitzkrieg supersonic attack that he had going on in the early rounds. Ryan Garcia is super dangerous early in fights. He's got a lot of first and second round knockouts. But in the middle rounds, Carlos Morales started to bring it on. Ryan Garcia found himself tying up a lot, looking up at the clock a lot, to the point where at the end of the fight, the crowd was basically booing Ryan Garcia. That was a really difficult fight. I remember even feeling a little bit bad for him in the post-fight interview because he's hearing this cascade of boos because of his very underwhelming, uninspired performance against Carlos Morales. Very difficult fight, and I think that style-wise, there is a little bit of overlap between Morales and Javier Fortuna. I mean, there are obviously differences as well. Fortuna's a southpaw, Morales is an orthodox fighter, but in the rugged nature and in the kind of patient counter-punching style, Javier Fortuna has two different fight styles. It seems like if he's fighting a taller fighter like Robert Easter Jr., he's more inclined to pursue them and to come after them with big punches, especially with somebody like Easter who's trying to control range, keep you on the outside. Robert Easter Jr., like Ryan Garcia, is a taller fighter, but very different style. He controls range more so, whereas Ryan Garcia is looking for huge counter-punching opportunities. He wants you to jump in so he could blast you with his signature left hook, which is so beautifully timed. That thing is a gem to behold, Ryan Garcia's left hook. But you saw Ryan Garcia start to work up, fighting better and better fighters. Again, Jason Velez, impressive victory. Carlos Morales, less impressive in the style of victory. This was actually a majority decision win. It wasn't even unanimous. It turned out being a close fight, and Ryan Garcia had to kind of dig deep to just make it out of there. He was not having a good time against Carlos Morales. And then he starts racking off a few more knockout wins against Braulio Rodriguez, Jose Lopez, and then he fights what is seen to be a step-up opponent at the time against Romero Duno. Ryan Garcia blasted him out of there in the first round. And then on Valentine's Day in 2020 on DAZN, Ryan Garcia was set to fight Francisco Fonseca. This was seen to be another step-up fight. Fonseca has fought great fighters, very, very good fighters in the past, such as Gervonta Davis and Tevin Farmer. But when he got in there with Ryan Garcia put his lights out. This was a scintillating performance. First round knockout of Francisco Fonseca on Valentine's Day. This was kind of like a high profile step up opportunity where Ryan Garcia is headlining the card. This is in the Honda Center in Anaheim, California, my hometown, by the way. I live in Long Beach, but from Anaheim. So this was a great breakthrough performance for Ryan Garcia. And then it was about a year later where he fought Luke Campbell, where a lot of people thought, hey, is this Ryan Garcia biting off more than he could chew? Because here's the thing. A lot of times when we see these like shiny new objects, these new names of the game that appear untouchable, like who are some of the names right now? I mean, Jerron Boots Ennis, Virgil Ortiz. Gervonta Davis is still undefeated. Teofimo Lopez was that until he lost to George Kambosos. So you always get these like new names, like Fernando Vargas back in the day until he lost to Felix Trinidad way early in his career. That was too much too soon. But a lot of these guys appear to be untouchable. So for instance, when we're looking at Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna, as much experience and good wins as Javier Fortuna has, a lot of the public is like, oh, Ryan Garcia is going to get him out of there. Because, again, Ryan Garcia is looking special with his hand speed, with his punching power, and so forth, to where you've got betting odds where Ryan Garcia is a minus 650 over Javier Fortuna. That means he's a greater than 6-1 favorite. Javier Fortuna is not even that old. He's 32 years old, and he does have a lot of fights under his belt. I mean, he's got over 40 fights, but Ryan Garcia as a greater than 6-1 favorite over Fortuna, that's totally mispriced, and that just speaks to how much we value these young up-and-comers who are looking special against lesser competition. Well, Luke Campbell wasn't lesser competition. Luke Campbell is a former Olympic gold medalist. Luke Campbell is also a southpaw. So stylistically, this was pretty difficult where, you know, Ryan Garcia, again, got dropped in the early rounds. And he got dropped where he guessed low and tried to block what he thought was going to be a body shot. And then Luke Campbell went high and caught him clean, put him on his back. And Ryan Garcia beat the 10 count, made it out of the round, and then recovered well to where he probably won the following round. Very good recovery for Ryan Garcia. And I think that that is one of the keys going into this next fight. The fact that he has tasted the canvas and got up to beat a top contender. And the way that he beat him was kind of interesting as well. Like, by the end of the 5th round, he had Luke Campbell so badly hurt that Campbell kind of went crashing into the ropes because Ryan Garcia caught him coming in with that beautiful check left hook. It happens like that. He caught Luke Campbell. Luke Campbell goes staggering into the ropes. He's kind of like hobbling into the ropes, and then is saved by the bell. So then the 6th round happens, another round where Ryan Garcia probably wins, but it was a closer round. And then Ryan Garcia finishes Luke Campbell by, unlike Campbell, who faked low and went high, Ryan Garcia was jabbing high, shooting right hands high, faked high, and then went low with the left hook to the body that ended up sinking Luke Campbell to one knee and then to 2 knees with both of his gloves on the canvas. He did not get up, and that was all she wrote. Super dramatic victory for Ryan Garcia, where he's being embraced by Canelo, Oscar De La Hoya, his trainer Eddie Reynoso, a camp that Ryan Garcia has since left and went to Joe Goossen, the veteran trainer who, I mean, it must have been Christmas for Joe Goossen. You know, he had always spoken glowingly about Ryan Garcia's potential, his talent. Joe Goossen has always been pro Ryan Garcia. So the fact that Ryan Garcia then comes to Joe Goossen, oh my gosh, like, could you ask for any more as a trainer, especially given the high profile name? Like, Joe Goossen has trained famous fighters before, but Ryan Garcia at like 23 years old has this buzzing of a name where he's one of the biggest names in the game. Even if there are a few lightweights who have accomplished more at this point, Devin Haney, same age, undisputed champion. Gervonta Davis has actually headlined a few pay-per-view events, so I can't say Ryan Garcia is a bigger name than Gervonta Davis right now. Gervonta Davis is actually really growing in stature. He's you know, selling out in Atlanta, Barclays in Brooklyn. Gervonta Davis is really growing in stature, but you know, for a moment, Teofimo Lopez, you know, has accomplished more in beating Vasily Lomachenko to capture those titles than George Kambosos obviously beat Teofimo Lopez, and then Devin Haney beat George Kambosos. But all that to say, there are more proven names, Vasily Lomachenko, than Ryan Garcia, but Ryan Garcia's name and the excitement around his name is pretty damn high for somebody as young as he is. And it's kind of interesting because you look at Ryan Garcia and you listen to Ryan Garcia, he just sounds like a popular kid in high school or college. Like, he's a pretty sharp dude. Like, you listen to him in interviews, he's got a good sense of humor. He's interesting when you hear him talk. He's, you know, a pretty thoughtful guy. And so you couple that with his, you know, kind of Ricky Martin-esque, Golden Boy-esque looks. He doesn't look like somebody who should be boxing. He looks like somebody who should be taking pictures for the gram, right? Like, that's kind of the look of Ryan Garcia. So the fact that he looks like that, but also has this seemingly special fighting ability, like, what are the chances that you get that? I mean, there have been exceptions to that rule. I mean, you had, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard. You had, obviously, Oscar De La Hoya, famously Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali. You've had, you know, good-looking people who just turn out to be these physical savants. Ryan Garcia looks like he kind of fits the bill there. So that's also what has led to a lot of skepticism. Like, no way that this, you know, Justin Bieber is also like this badass who could just whoop all of these kind of hardened fighters who have been spending their whole lives fighting. What are the chances of that? Well, it looks like it might be pretty high here. So after beating Luke Campbell, Ryan Garcia fights Emmanuel Tagoe in a fight where Tagoe, a pretty good fighter out of Ghana, 5'8" to Ryan Garcia's 5'10", or, you know, pretty much the same height roughly as Javier Fortuna. Tagoe and Fortuna are both around 5'8", but Tagoe, it seemed like after the second round, he got hit a couple times and then started fighting more of a survivalist fight where he wasn't engaging Ryan Garcia in the same way that he had engaged other opponents in the past. So in that one, Ryan Garcia didn't look special. He actually started to look a little bit basic in his skill set. Like, his timing wasn't looking great. His creative attack wasn't looking great. He basically looked like a 1-2 and maybe a 1-2-3 type of guy, but there was nothing special about the timing in those punches or the delivery mechanism in getting them off effectively. And again, Tagoe was fighting a survivalist fight, which makes it tougher to look great against somebody who's looking to survive. So Ryan Garcia more or less cruised to a unanimous decision win over Tagoe, and now he's fighting Javier Fortuna, who, again, former belt holder at 130, and he was a name that was developing and buzzing for some time. You know, Ryan Garcia has a good amateur background, amateur pedigree, as does Javier Fortuna out of the Dominican Republic. So, you know, when he lost to Jason Sosa via 11th round TKO back in 2016, that was a big setback because not only did he lose his title, but, you know, he was working his way up on a lot of these like HBO undercards at the time to where it seemed like he kind of went back to the back of the line after that. And whatever perception people have of the growing name of Javier Fortuna was kind of shattered in that TKO loss. So then he won his next 4 fights, 2 via knockout, 2 via decision, and then he fights Robert Easter Jr. in January of 2018. Javier Fortuna was the B-side to Robert Easter Jr. because Robert Easter Jr., again, at the time was that shiny new object who was supposed to beat Javier Fortuna. Ended up being a super competitive fight where Javier Fortuna was on his front foot trying to collapse the pocket against the very tall, or, you know, at least much taller, 3 inches taller, Robert Easter Jr. And Robert Easter Jr. was awarded a split decision win over Fortuna. That was an interesting fight. Again, Easter, very different stylistically than Ryan Garcia, but they're both taller fighters. So then Javier Fortuna fights Adrian Granados, and it's weird. Javier Fortuna, it's a rough fight, and Javier Fortuna is a rugged guy. Adrian Granados is a pretty rugged guy. So Javier Fortuna falls between the ropes, falls outside of the ring, seemingly injures his neck to where he's carted off. He's in a neck brace, and he's carried out on a stretcher in the 4th round. It was really kind of bizarre. Not too dissimilar from when Kermit Cintron fell out of the ring fighting the much taller Paul the Punisher Williams. So then after that, Fortuna wins his next 3 fights against Sharif Boguer, Jesus Cuellar, and Antonio Lozada Jr. The second 2 of those were by knockout. And Antonio Lozada Jr. is a taller fighter as well. He's about 5'10". So I was kind of trying to draw some similarities between Lozada and Ryan Garcia. Stylistically, again, they're a bit different, but Lozada has a 73-inch reach. Ryan Garcia has a 70-inch reach. You would think that Javier Fortuna, because of his height, has a very short reach, but it's actually 68.5 inches. It's only 1.5 inches shorter than Ryan Garcia's reach. And in Javier Fortuna's next fight, after beating Antonio Lozada Jr., he fights JoJo Diaz, who has a 64-inch reach. So think about that. JoJo Diaz is 5'6". Fortuna is about 5'8", but has a 4-inch reach advantage over JoJo Diaz. Well, in this fight, this was southpaw versus southpaw. JoJo is basically sticking around in the pocket, kind of beating Javier Fortuna to the punch a lot of the times, kind of taking the fight to Fortuna where there was a lot of trench fighting, a lot of body work. Javier Fortuna was more so going to the head with counter punches. JoJo Diaz was just raking Fortuna to the body, staying super busy, and basically outworked him in the final rounds to where, you know, Fortuna's legs don't appear to be what they used to be. Like, he was moving around the ring really well, even in the middle rounds against JoJo Diaz. And it seems like Fortuna against taller fighters will attack them to collapse the pocket to make up for the reach gap. But against shorter fighters or guys around his height, he seems like he's a little bit, he fights a slicker style where he's moving around the perimeter a little bit more, looking for counter-punching opportunities, trying to slip punches and then counter. Well, I don't think that Javier Fortuna's reflexes are as good as they used to be. Like his head movement, he gets hit flush a lot more than he used to, and Joseph Diaz wasn't having trouble fighting Javier Fortuna. Yeah, Fortuna was still able to slip a lot of them, but a lot of those punches from JoJo Diaz were landing cleanly, and JoJo Diaz ends up beating Javier Fortuna via close but unanimous decision. It was one of those 115, 113-ish, 116 to 112 types of fights. And so that was a big win for JoJo Diaz. That and probably JoJo Diaz's win over Tevin Farmer that secured him that 130-pound title are probably JoJo Diaz's 2 best wins of his career. Very disappointing setback for Javier Fortuna, but then he earns a knockout in his next fight, and then here he finds another big opportunity to fight Ryan Garcia. Not a belt holder, but again, one of the biggest names in the game. So what do I expect to take place between Ryan Garcia and Javier Fortuna? Well, again, I think that the odds are way mispriced here. You cannot have Ryan Garcia as a greater than 6-1 favorite over somebody with the experience and just the fight-by-fight opponent quality of Javier Fortuna. Again, the guy is like 37-3. Again, he's got a couple draws and no contests and stuff, but 37-3, and he's got some quality wins over pretty good fighters. Not any great wins, but he's got some pretty good wins. Brian Vasquez, Carlos Velasquez, Jesus Cuellar, and so forth. Abner Cotto. Good wins, but not great wins. And it seems like when he's fighting, like, you know, the top competition, he's coming up a little bit short, like against JoJo Diaz, against Robert Easter Jr. So there is a little bit of inconsistency in some of Fortuna's performances, especially that 11th round TKO at the hands of Jason Sosa. So matchups-wise, I'm seeing the shorter Fortuna have to collapse the pocket against Ryan Garcia. So that is a scary prospect when you factor in Ryan Garcia's check left hook. Like, he's looking for the opportunity to time you. So Javier Fortuna, the southpaw, is going to have to find a way to neutralize Ryan Garcia's left hook, but to stay effective. Like, is Fortuna gonna fight Garcia in the way that he fought Robert Easter Jr.? If he does, I kind of think he gets knocked out. If he's running up in there trying to collapse the pocket, you're giving Ryan Garcia too many opportunities to decapitate you with that left hook, or even with the straight right. Garcia can throw the 3-2, you know, the jab is being the 1, the straight right hand being the 2, and then the left hook being the 3. Sometimes Ryan Garcia will lead with the 3, follow it up with the 2. So Ryan Garcia, I'd imagine, is going to be looking for these opportunities for Javier Fortuna. Fortuna also throws a lot of loops and weird angles on punches where they are getting around the guard of the opponent often. But here's the thing, Ryan Garcia is pretty good at, like, you know, controlling distance, at least in some of his fights. Again, much less so against Carlos Morales. And again, I can't unsee that fight. Yes, it was 4 years ago. Yes, I think Ryan Garcia has improved since then. I don't know yet what to make of him leaving the Reynoso camp and then joining forces with Joe Goossen, especially this early in that process. They do have the Emmanuel Tagoe fight under their belt. This is going to be his second fight with Joe Goossen. Not exactly sure what to make of that yet. In the long run, it could produce good results, but I think that there's a learning curve to developing new techniques and tutelage. So we don't know where that stands, and we don't know truly why Ryan Garcia left Eddie Reynoso. It's supposedly because Reynoso spends more and more time, you know, exclusively with Canelo, and we just saw Frank Sanchez, the heavyweight, also leave Eddie Reynoso and go to Joe Goossen as well. So 2 people have made the exodus from Eddie Reynoso to Joe Goossen. So Ryan Garcia, I'm also thinking, was there like a language barrier? Was there also some sort of a lack of communication between Ryan Garcia and, you know, Canelo and Eddie Reynoso, being that they are primarily Spanish speakers? I don't know the answer to that. I'm just kind of hypothesizing here. But with Ryan Garcia versus Fortuna, Fortuna throws a lot of loops on his punches. They're going to try to make their way around or through the guard of Ryan Garcia. Garcia also doesn't keep his hands high a lot. So I'd imagine that, I don't think that Ryan Garcia is all of a sudden going to be here for the entirety of the fight. So I think that he's going to do what he normally does, which is keep his hands often around here. Javier Fortuna is pretty quick, especially in the early rounds. So I think Javier Fortuna is going to be pasting Ryan Garcia up a bit in the early to even middle rounds. The issue is Javier Fortuna's legs at 32. Is he 33 yet? Oh no, he actually turns 33 the day before the fight against Ryan Garcia. So he's going to be 33 when he enters the ring. His legs aren't what they used to be, not only in his ability to move around the perimeter of the ring, but think about it. Like, when you're jumping into the pocket, that requires legs and leg endurance. So if your legs start tiring in the middle rounds, then you are that much less elusive when you are collapsing the pocket. So either if Javier Fortuna can't hurt or maybe drop Ryan Garcia in the early rounds, and of course, there's always a chance Ryan Garcia can drop or even stop Javier Fortuna in the early rounds. But I think this one's going to go a few rounds, even if there is a knockdown in the fight. Like, I do think that at some point, Ryan Garcia is probably going to knock Javier Fortuna down. I think Javier Fortuna is going to crack Ryan Garcia. I don't know if it's going to result in a knockdown. It very well could. And Javier Fortuna has a lot of tricky techniques and a lot of, endurance zapping techniques as well. He'll push your head down. He'll put you in headlocks. He'll clinch you. He'll do all kinds of things. He'll put his, forearm up in your neck and in your face. He does all kinds of things to kind of muddy the waters, especially if things aren't really going his way. He's got a lot of veteran savvy, veteran tactics. So I think that this one is going to go a few rounds. It's going to be interesting because sparks will fly early. Again, Ryan Garcia is extremely dangerous in the early rounds, and Javier Fortuna can let his hands fly, and it's going to take maybe a little bit of adjusting for Ryan Garcia to get used to Javier Fortuna's unorthodox southpaw stance and style. So if this one does go a few rounds, say they after 5 rounds, it might be like 3 rounds to 2 Ryan Garcia. I think that even with Javier Fortuna's experience, that things start getting more and more dangerous for him because of his aging legs and Ryan Garcia's dangerous punching ability and hand speed. And let's not forget, that knockout of Luke Campbell took place in the 7th round. He also has a 5th round knockout of Braulio Rodriguez. So Ryan Garcia's punching power does tend to carry a little bit late. No, he didn't do much with Emmanuel Tagoe late in the fight, but he also does have an 8th round TKO over No Regoza way back in 2017. I mean, it's almost too early in his career to even really make that relevant for this one, but it was an 8th round TKO in an 8-round fight. So his punching power does tend to carry late. But again, I've seen this pattern of Ryan Garcia also looking increasingly basic once he gets to the middle rounds. Like, it's almost like he's out of tricks up his sleeve, and then he's relegated to just 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, and his timing starts getting less tricky and so forth. You don't want that to be the case against a guy like Javier Fortuna. Like, you don't want the Ryan Garcia in the second half of the fight against Carlos Morales to happen again against Javier Fortuna, because Fortuna is dangerous and experienced enough to actually really make you pay for that. But I do think that this fight is going to go into the late rounds. I just think that it's Javier Fortuna's legs that are going to be the determining factor here. So if he doesn't have the leg endurance to elusively get in and out of the pocket and ambush Ryan Garcia effectively, then that means that he could do one of 2 things. Either jump in without the leg endurance and without the agility and get caught and hurt and probably stopped, or start to fight a little bit of a survivalist fight where you start doing the Emmanuel Tagoe, moving around more, kind of fouling more, holding more, headlocking more, and just trying to basically work your way through the fight. I think that we might get to that point here if Ryan Garcia is still lucid and on the hunt in the middle and late rounds. I don't think Javier Fortuna has the luxury in this one that he did against JoJo Diaz to just stand in the pocket for like 1 minute at a time, 2 minutes at a time, almost to where you're like head to head, just trading shots in the phone booth. You can't, at least at this point, I don't see you being able to do that with Ryan Garcia. But again, I mean, Ryan Garcia isn't going to want Javier Fortuna all up in his space either. Ryan Garcia is going to want Javier Fortuna out there. So something's got to give, because Ryan Garcia is going to be looking to take Javier Fortuna's head off when Javier Fortuna comes in, but Javier Fortuna won't be able to come in and then stay in. I don't think he will, at least. Like, if he is able to come in and stay in, we could be in for a very interesting fight and perhaps an upset. I just think that it's more likely that those opportunities of being able to stay in, first of all, you got to be careful in the early rounds, and I think Javier Fortuna's ability to do that against a taller fighter is going to be diminished compared to what he was able to do against Robert Issa Jr., a close fight that he lost. So I think that Ryan Garcia at some point along the way might drop Javier Fortuna, but I think that this is going to be a muddier fight down the stretch, and Ryan Garcia, I believe, is an underrated round winner. Like, if you look at his fight with Luke Campbell, he didn't only knock Luke Campbell out, but he won the vast majority of those rounds against, again, a very good fighter. So Ryan Garcia's ability to just straight up win rounds in a round where he's not hurting you, dropping you, basically in a relatively uneventful round, that's still a round that Ryan Garcia could win. And I think that that is the under-discussed part of this matchup. Ryan Garcia's ability to win rounds against Javier Fortuna. Not just to hurt him, but to just win rounds in the slower rounds, as online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer would call them. So I think that that's going to be the key here, and I think that that is going to assist Ryan Garcia in winning a very close decision over Javier Fortuna. I think that it's possible that Ryan Garcia get the late stoppage. And again, I think that an upset is also potentially in play. Of course, when you have somebody the caliber of Javier Fortuna, he could, kind of cuff Ryan Garcia around with looping punches. Ryan Garcia, who knows, could get hurt like he did against Luke Campbell, but Javier Fortuna might be more willing and able to put his foot on the gas and to make that count and to capitalize on having a hurt, wounded Ryan Garcia. These things are possible. I just think that the most likely scenario and outcome is Ryan Garcia winning more rounds than Javier Fortuna, maybe getting through a few scary moments against the, again, very tricky, rugged, and pretty hard-hitting Javier Fortuna. I just think that Fortuna's legs are going to be much less impressive in the second half of the fight, to where he's going to be relegated to staying on the outside. He's going to try to collapse the pocket effectively, but with diminishing returns over time. And Ryan Garcia, I think, is going to win like a 116 to 112-ish, maybe even 117 to 111, and give or take a knockdown perhaps type of, I'll say, unanimous decision win. I was thinking either a late stoppage or maybe a split decision, majority decision style win where you've got one judge that gives it a draw or gives it to Javier Fortuna. But I'm going to go with a unanimous decision in this one. Something like 116 to 112. But yeah, let me know what you think about Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna. If Ryan Garcia is able to pass this difficult, challenging test in Fortuna, are they going to make the Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis, or should I say Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight? That's been the guy who Ryan Garcia has been calling out, since that Carlos Morales fight. Ryan Garcia was calling out the much more proven Gervonta Davis as early as 2018, 2017. So this isn't like a new phenomenon. Gervonta Davis's name has been in Ryan Garcia's mouth for some time, and they've been throwing social media shade back and forth for several years now, as young as they both are, especially Ryan Garcia. Gervonta Davis is a few years older than Garcia. But yeah, what happens with Ryan Garcia if he's able to get past Javier Fortuna? Again, I would caution Golden Boy, and Golden Boy has been, taking his time with guys like Ryan Garcia, with guys like Jaime Munguia. Virgil Ortiz looks like he might be more ready for the top elite than both, even though I do tend to think that Jaime Munguia has potential against elite fighters at 160. And I think Ryan Garcia, in short order, if not now already, is in a similar position. But Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya, has been taking his time building up prospects. It's very unlike the way that Oscar De La Hoya used to conduct his own career, where he was fighting everybody from an early age, basically straight out of winning the gold medal. He was within a couple years fighting the Obacars, I Cortez, Rafael Ruelas, Chiquitito Gennaro Hernandez, and a lot of legends and just very good fighters like John Melita and so forth. He seems like he's taking a responsible approach and not letting the carriage get ahead of the horse because of Ryan Garcia's fame, and is actually being responsible in managing Ryan Garcia's fight-by-fight opponent quality and schedule. So I'm not convinced that if Ryan Garcia beats Javier Fortuna, that we go right into Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia. Not only because of the, cross-promotional hurdles that so many of these hypothetical super fights that we want to see run into, but also because I think it's more likely that Ryan Garcia fights perhaps a Joseph JoJo Diaz. Another shorter southpaw, doesn't hit like Gervonta Davis, but that would be another logical next step for Ryan Garcia. That's just my guess. But yeah, let me know what you think about this particular Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna matchup. Who do you see winning and how? And how do you see the aftermath of this fight playing out in the very exciting 135-pound lightweight division? Please let me know in the comments, and like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.